The Disappeared, Part 8, Eduardo. My dear Sylvia, Ramon isn't responding to my taps. That is not unusual, for he has been spending longer and longer hours in interrogation. I suffer now for the two of us, and the burden is heavy. I no longer believe in the lies I tell myself about the torture ending. I won't hold out. I'll tell what I know. My only comfort is to think of Teresa and her mother away from Argentina, and safe. Teresa once told me that they had relatives in Uruguay. I imagine they took the ferry across the Plata River to Montevideo. I remember in another lifetime how our student football team went to Montevideo for a match. We celebrated our win in the cafes along the Rambla, the wide boulevard that follows the river. I see Teresa there, walking with no fear, looking across the river to Buenos Aires. I believe Teresa and Signora Fratelli will stay in Montevideo, close to Buenos Aires, hoping that one day Ramon will be freed to take up his brush and paint. And then I shudder to think of the pictures that Ramon might paint now, pictures of what his life has become. Ramon does not return to his cell. I hear a helicopter lift off from the prison yard. The helicopters fly over the Plata River, or the Paraná River, or over the wide sea to drop their human cargo into the mute waters. I have heard the tales of how they are sometimes careless and do not use enough cement to anchor the bodies to the ocean floor, so that the corpses wash up onto the shore. I consider where I wish my body thrown. Into the sea, I decide. Somewhere where endless water will wash away all of this misery. It is terrible being without Ramon. Our jailers must know how much strength and courage the small touch of another human life gives, for I will suffer twice as much when I have only my own poor, dwindling bit of courage. This is the longest night of my life. I go over the past, turning over the pages of my years, searching for something that for even a few moments will lift me out of this hell, and the certain knowledge of tomorrow's pain. I look for a memory strong enough. I try the bright summer's day when Mother and Father took us to Mar del Plata for the weekend. We had been invited to stay with friends who had an apartment at the resort by the sea. You and I were allowed to go by ourselves to the beach. I was 12, embarrassed at having to watch over a little sister. You could hardly see the sand for the crowds on the beach. Every chair had its brightly colored umbrella. The whole seaside was filled with yellow circles like so many small suns. You claimed a square of sand and began to build a castle, decorating it with bits of shell and sea glass. When I offered to help, you pushed me away. You were always independent. You always knew what you wanted and went after it. I left you, building your castle, and ran to the water. Pitying the timid children who were standing uncertain and shivering in the shallow water, I had once been afraid of the water, and Father, embarrassed by my fear, was going to throw me into the deep end of the pool, thinking to cure my fear by more fear. You saved me by distracting him. Little as you were, Sylvia, you were brave enough to paddle into the deep end when I couldn't. Because of your example, I set about learning to swim well. That day in Mar del Plata, I waded past the people and out to where the river was deep. I plunged into the water. There were few swimmers that far out, and I had the river to myself. When I came up for breath, I turned my head away from the shore and saw only the river that flowed into the sea. I had no fear. The water was not an enemy, but a friend, holding me safely in its arms. I had left you playing on the beach, knowing you had been the one to send me into the freedom of the deep water. You not only made me a fine swimmer, but you helped me find a strength I didn't know I had. Though you could not understand my motives, without that courage from you, I would not have taken up the fight against the generals and their repression with murders. Alone here in my cell, I worry that my arrest will lead you into a desperate act to help me. I worry that you will risk your life, as you did in the pool when I hadn't the courage to plunge in. I want to believe you are safely on the shore, as you were that day at Mar del Plata, far away from the danger that I swim in every second of the day. But I know you too well. Worry about what the generals might do to those of us who protested made you want to hide in the spending of your time with clothes and dancing, but that was never the real Sylvia. I tremble to think what the real Sylvia will do to save me this time. I tell myself it would be for the best if I made them finish me off, so you would not attempt something foolish. Then I tell myself that if I were to give in, you would never forgive me. I have these conversations in my head. I say one thing, then another tells me something else, and the two parts never agree. Each one can argue convincingly. The guard comes to take me to General Remos. Today he is playing the role of a schoolmaster, wanting to argue me out of my beliefs. You must admit this country was in chaos, he says. Bombings on both sides. The guerrillas kidnapping innocent people and holding them for ransom to buy guns to destroy our country. Something had to be done. The military only wished to establish order. He says this in a forced voice, as if he is trying to convince himself. If a few innocent people are sacrificed, that's a small price to pay. I stand in front of his desk for what seems hours, and I am so tired I can barely express myself, but I must answer him. You believe innocent people like myself and my friends can be sacrificed for the good of the state because you place no value on us. You believe the state is more important than the individual. I believe just the opposite. The state exists to protect the individual. That is the kind of foolishness you put in your articles. You are a gullible boy. With the tip of his pen, Remos nudges the familiar folder of my articles as if it were unclean. You must know who sent us your articles and who betrayed you. Why not give us his name? His betrayal would be no excuse for my doing the same. Anyhow, it wouldn't do you any good. He will have long since disappeared and be hiding under another name in another identity. Your articles criticizing the government are the work of a child. I goad him. Then why do you keep mentioning them? He stands up and slaps my face. I am weak with standing so long, and the strength of the blow knocks me to my knees. After hours under the glaring lights, the cement floor feels cool under my hands. Beneath the desk, I see Remos's shiny boots. I watch, helpless, as one of the boots comes at me. I feel a sharp pain in the side of my head. The guard is called, and I am dragged away to my cell. I resolve that when I next see him, I will say whatever Remos wants. But then a small thing happens. It is odd that while we wait for the grand events that will make a difference, one small thing can change our lives. Somewhere in the blocks of concrete, there must exist a tiny opening, a tunnel leading from the world on the outside of my cell. For a mouse has found its way to me, a brown mouse with a white chest and 4 white paws. He has jet bead eyes and busy whiskers. The inside of his ears are pink rose petals. I am rigid with stillness, for the presence of even so small a living creature is comforting. He discovers a crumb on the floor, thrusts it into his mouth, and scampers about searching for more crumbs. When nothing is to be found, he sits on his haunches and proceeds to clean his whiskers. All the life in the world seems packed into that scrap of an animal, as if the mouse might explode with life. I am not alone. Whatever happens to me doesn't matter, for the world has millions and millions of small creatures who are not timid. Together, we are stronger than all the generals.